cybersecurity is a team sport. It is not an individual sport, and it is something that anyone and everyone has to practice on a daily basis. Hi, I'm Adam Levin. I'm co-host of the podcast What the Hack with Adam Levin and author of the book Swiped. We're going to be discussing cybersecurity threats and how to protect your company during this holiday season.
I'm holding up his book, Swiped by Adam Levin. How to protect yourself in a world full of scammers, phishers, and identity thieves. Adam Levin is an internationally recognized expert on cybersecurity, and he is the founder of Cyber Scout and co-founder of Credit.com. Without further ado, Adam Levin, welcome back to Mind Your Business.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's happy holidays, and I'm honored to be on a platform with so many incredibly exciting people that you've had in the past.
Thank you. And the topic, as we mention each time, I'm going to ask this in a sad way, but has the problem gotten a little easier to deal with or unfortunately worse?
No, the problem has gotten a great deal worse. People are more aware of it, and people are making more efforts in order to make themselves harder targets. But the truth is that it's been exploding. I mean, they just estimated that in the past year, over 1.2 billion, that's Dr. Evil, pinky to the lips, billion dollars have been paid out in ransom to different ransomware groups around the world. And that's just one small example of how this has been impacting businesses, consumers, government agencies. I mean, it is a serious problem. And I think one thing, in order to kind of level set, that we have to get straight is there are an awful lot of people that go, who would want to hack me? I'm just a regular person. Or a business goes, we're small. Nobody cares about us. And the answer is no one is too unimportant or irrelevant or too small to be a target for a cyber attack or a ransomware attack. And the reason is that you may look at yourself in the mirror and see you, but when a hacker looks at you, they see Jay-Z, Beyonce, Adam Levine, because you got what they want. You have personally identifiable information that can be used in identity theft. You have financial information, or it may have nothing to do with you, but it may relate to someone you know, someplace you work, someone you're related to, or some activity you're involved in, and you are simply the conduit to a much larger river.
Now, I'm always sensitive to pronounce people's names correctly, and I'm on the air here. I apologize if it's Adam Levine, correct?
No.
Adam
Levine is the rock star. I only wish. Okay. But I'm Adam. I always say, think 7, so it's Levin.
I got it. Now, question. Let's get right into the heart of the topic. What's one cyber threat facing businesses now? Meaning now we're recording this is airing in early November 2022. What's something that's facing businesses during the holiday season that they really should be thinking about now, should be on their radar screen?
Yeah, and this is something that most people don't think about, and it's those out-of-office auto replies. And, people go away during the holiday season, and when someone tries to contact you or they make a call into you, there's an auto reply that says that I'm away, and oftentimes people explain why they're away, which I don't understand, and they tell people how long they're going to be away, and they say, but in my absence, here's so-and-so you can speak to. So now what you've done unwittingly is you've given a hacker or a scammer a sort of a blueprint of the way in, which is you can call or contact that person, say you're looking for the person who's away, and possibly get them to give up information, or it's a way in to the system of the network at where you work.
Now, Adam, that's a very fair point, and if I may, let me just paint the other side of the coin. What is a company supposed to do if that person is a key individual, and we don't want to frustrate, the company doesn't want to frustrate their client base? They want to make sure that they have someone to talk to in that employee's absence.
Well, no, what they want to do is you want to say, let's say, info at, or a central location where your email can go, for instance, And then the person who is overseeing that situation will direct the email to the right person. But it's not like right off the bat they're directed to a specific individual. Or you have them, the phone call, feed into the central phone system of the company, where then the operator will figure out, based on instructions he or she has, as to where to route the call. But it's very important, especially when you have all this business email compromise where people are spoofing other people's email, and you get it from either a manager or someone you know within the organization, and it has a sense of urgency requiring you to do something immediately. It's not as direct. And the problem is, between LinkedIn and About Us pages on websites, you're almost getting sort of this communications tree within an organization, which makes it easier for people who are scammers or hackers to be able to direct communications to certain people and then make certain representations. Like, for instance, hey, I needed to know more information about your company. Can you please communicate with me? And here's the easiest way to get me. And they provide a link. You click on the link, and all of a sudden there's malware on your computer in your network that then could shut down your system.
Now, what are some other points that businesses should be aware of, in particular phishing, as you just touched on? Maybe even for some of those that are living under a rock, explain what that is and then how we could protect ourselves from that.
Oh, absolutely. And I call it the pantheon of phishings. There are 4 major ways that you can be phished. And that is an email that is generalized, like dear cardholder, dear member, dear policyholder. Then there's the spear phishing, which would be dear Yitzchok. There is vishing. That's where you get a phone call and someone is representing themselves to be either from a business partner, a government agency, someone that your organization may be doing business with. And then there's smishing, SMS text-based phishing. That's where you get a text. It conveys a sense of urgency, like your account has been frozen. Click here and re-authenticate yourself, and we can get your account back up and running. And as we had talked about in the past when we were together, there are 4 kinds of hackers. There's the state-sponsored hacker, which, by the way, more and more insurance companies are backing away from protecting you under cyber liability policies if it's a state-sponsored hack. There's the for-profit hacker, which we've certainly seen that with Target and Home Depot and a number of the iconic breaches that have occurred. There's the cause-related hacker, which an example of that was Sony, where North Korea was extremely upset about a movie, although some people thought it was someone within the organization that had an axe to grind. And there's the because I can hacker, which was referred to by a former president as a 400-pound hacker on a mattress in his mother's basement in New Jersey.
But they're all equally dangerous.
They are absolutely equally dangerous. And again, what they're looking for, especially if it's a company, they're looking for a way in, either for the purpose of stealing data or putting ransomware on your system, freezing everything and demanding a payment in order to give you the decryption key.
Adam, thank you for carving out of your crazy hectic schedule to join us once again on Mind Your Business. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And you flatter me. So
you deserve it. We were talking about some of the elements specifically as it relates to the holiday season. And of course, best practices, as our listeners have come to expect from us. We talk, there's a Yiddish word, tachlis, meaning common sense, down to earth. It's not just pie in the sky stuff. We're talking about real issues. Cybersecurity is real. Adam discussed that this year alone, unfortunately, it's on pace to cost companies approximately $1.2 billion. It's something that an ounce of prevention. I'm going to ask the obvious question before we get back to the holidays. What does it take for people to realize to just play, be prepared, just play some, just protect yourself with some defense? How much headache and heartache could it prevent if you just have that that good router in place and that good antivirus software, whatever you recommend, how important is it just to be prepared?
No, it's critically important to be prepared. And the problem is that as an organization, you can do every single thing right. You can follow the 3 M's, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is how do you minimize your risk of exposure or reduce your attackable surface? How do you monitor your systems so you know you have a problem as quickly as possible? And then how do you manage the damage? You can do everything right. You can be absolutely secure at 9 a.m. and at 9:01 a.m., somebody working remotely within your organization or someone in the office receives an email as part of a phishing attack, and they click on the wrong link, and suddenly the bad guys are in your system. So cybersecurity is a team sport. There are no victory laps in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity has to be an ongoing conversation, not something that when someone is onboarded, you have in their packet, and then every quarter you say, oh, by the way, let's talk about cybersecurity. So it's got to be part of an ongoing process. You have to be always thinking about educating everyone within the organization as to what are the threats, what are the red flags, and what are the things that you should be doing in the event that any of these things are apparent to you, or you even make a mistake. You know, there are people within organizations that have a culture where they're terrified to tell their boss, I think I just clicked on the wrong link. Within an organization, you need to have a culture of privacy and security where everybody feels a stake and nobody is afraid to say, I think I made a mistake and we got to do something about it right now.
Coming back to the fact that right now we're in the holiday season. Again, this recording is taking place in early November 2022. What are some other holiday-based threats that companies need to be mindful of?
Well, we're in a world now where it's not just phishing attacks by sophisticated people. There's something known as phishing as a service. And that means that there are sophisticated people who create tools that enable someone to hack into a system or enable someone to phish other people successfully. But the people who are actually doing the work, that are the expediters, aren't really that bright and aren't really that experienced. They can just basically find it through a site on the dark web. They can pay a fee and then offer the developer of these tools a VIG every time they're successful in an attack. And so therefore the bar to entry is lower. And yet the quality of the product is higher. You know, this isn't like the old days where you'd get something and the grammar would be horrible. There'd be misspellings everywhere. The logos that they use to make you think that they're Citibank or Chase, the colors aren't right. There's just something that just feels very unprofessional. These days, most of these attacks are extremely professional, but because of phishing as a service, they could be carried out by people who are not necessarily professional. And, you know, during the holiday season, there are all kinds of scams, whether it's charity-related scams, job-related scams. I mean, now you have a situation where people, you know, we see a recession coming. Everywhere you turn, you see that there are layoffs. In other organizations, there are bonuses for people who are retained. And so any time that someone would get an email from what they think is within the organization that says anything to do with layoffs, bonuses, salary structure, plans for next year, it's more than likely that they'll click on the link, and that could be very dangerous. That's why a lot of companies, as part of their email security systems, now indicate when an email is coming from outside the system, which is a warning to people who are inside the system that there could be a problem.
Now, Adam, a key question that I'm sure you're asked all the time, and that is, today the working remotely has certainly gained popularity over the last few years.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons. What are some of the recommended best practices that a company can and should enforce recognizing that there are people that are working remotely and are logging in, but yet at the same time, of course, that's a safe breach, perhaps, or somewhat safe, but it is a breach, but yet it's the way it is. How do we live with that?
Well, first of all, companies should employ a very strict security policy. There are people that say, well, this could be a little expensive, but frankly, I think anyone that works for you remotely should be provided with a device that's work only by the company. And that device should have on it all the security software that the company feels is necessary, and it should be made very clear. You do not use this device for anything other than work, and you do not share this device with members of your family, especially your kids. And I have a 10-year-old, I love him to death, but kids can be weapons of mass destruction within a family, and especially when it comes to a business. So businesses should issue work-only mobile devices if they're going to be used, and then work-only either laptops or computer systems that they make available to their employees. They should also make sure that any employee that's connecting remotely is using a virtual private network. And think of a VPN, and you can get them for very reasonable prices, but don't get the free ones because they could be collecting data. Get a virtual private network that you pay for. It's not that expensive. And think of it as an encrypted tube between your device and the network that you'll be communicating with. And it's very important. First of all, it shields you from spying eyes, so that if you're browsing or doing something on behalf of the company, it's difficult to tell where you are. And secondly, it's an extra layer of protection. Also, companies should make it clear that under no circumstances should an employee ever use any password that they use in their non-work life in their work life. And the passwords they do use in their work life should not even be a variation of a password they've used before. It's probably better for them to get a password manager, which can create extremely difficult to decipher passwords, and it can create new ones at the drop of a hat. But it's very important to separate. There has to be, between church and state, there has to be a clear, bright white line between what you do in your private life and what you do in your work life, especially when it comes to all things cyber.
Now, here's a question, and what you suggested, of course, is best practices and critical. Now I'm going to ask for those that the circumstances are that they are logging in from their home computer, from their home laptop, from their phone. What are some of the practices, the best practices, or the ways that they could at least possibly protect themselves, at least to the best extent possible?
Well, first of all, use long and strong passwords. Don't use dumb passwords, and don't use passwords you share across your universe of websites. Enable two-factor authentication, and that's where, as you know, you begin to log into a site, and then it's like, wait a minute, this device may not look familiar, or even if it does look familiar, we're still going to send a code to your device every time you log in, so that when you enter the code, we know it's you. That gives you an extra layer of protection. Do not download any apps that don't come from legitimate app stores like Apple or Google Play. And even then, you need to be careful. You need to read reviews, because one thing is for sure, if someone's had a bad experience with an app, they're going to get loud about it. Also, you don't click on links or open attachments unless you know exactly who they're from. And it's not even a bad idea if you get a communication from someone at work, assuming it is from someone at work, you contact that person and say, before I do anything, I just want to make absolutely sure that you're the one that sent me this communication. Because again, people can spoof that information, and they do business email compromise. Also, when you set up answers to security questions, and you do oftentimes when you're setting up new accounts, lie like a superhero. Because unfortunately, so much about us is posted online, either by us or by others. and that information oftentimes finds its way into security answers, it's important to be a little creative, but not so creative that you forget what you did and you end up being shut out of a system.
Adam, I just want to talk about Cyber Scout. So Cyber Scout is around now. Next year will be officially 2 decades.
It will. And, of course, the big news is that in 2021, I sold Cyber Scout to a company called Santique, which was Easy Shield and Identity Force. And then 6 months later, they sold it to TransUnion, which is very interesting because when we began originally as Identity Theft 911, and we were the first company with resolution at its core, we were under the wing of TransUnion, under the fraud department of TransUnion. And in fact, our first chief operating officer was the former head of fraud victims assistance at TransUnion. So I feel like, all life is a circle, as Harry Chapin used to say, and Cyber Scout is back home.
My guest this evening is the internationally recognized expert on cybersecurity, Adam Levin. He wrote the book, Swiped: How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves. A all too important read, unfortunately, but it is the way it is. As Adam pointed out earlier in the show, this year alone, unfortunately, it cost businesses to the tune of $1.2 billion. How unfortunate, and yet, as Adam discusses, many times, and it's in the book, and he's discussing on the show. Unfortunately, there is kind of, even if everyone, you check. You check every box of security. You're doing it right. You're really protecting yourself. There's still some element of risk. So certainly, the better you protect yourself, the lower the risk. So, with that. Let's jump in again, specifically as it relates to the holiday season. We are now in early, the show is being recorded in November of 2022. What are some lures most likely used by the bad guys for phishing?
Well, first of all, any communication within an organization could be a lure, and some of them can be incredibly sophisticated. For example, there was a true story that circulated about a year or so ago where someone who was the CEO of a portfolio company got an actual phone call from someone who was the CEO of the parent company, saying that as part of their co-op deal that they were doing with their member companies or their portfolio companies, everybody was contributing to an account that they would then use for advertising for the entire organization. And if he could please arrange for a $200,000 wire, that would be very important. And as he told others, this was the guy. This was the CEO from the parent company. I know. I've talked to him before. I heard his voice. I did it. So he wired the money. And a few days later, he was communicated with by the CEO of the parent company. And he said, I just want you to know that I took care of that wire you asked me to do. Whereupon the CEO of the big company said, what are you talking about? It was an actual deep fake audio, and he fell for it. And that's the problem, is that some of these scams are so good, and some of the scammers are so sophisticated that you really have to be on the lookout. Even if you get a call or a communication from someone, call them back and make sure it was really them. Wow. And if they get a little miffed at you, you could have just saved your job anyway because you didn't wire something someplace you shouldn't. But a lot of times, scammers will attack at the end of the day, at the end of the week, in a holiday season, where someone within the organization who has the authority either to provide data on other people in the organization or to make a wire, they get this, they think it's real, it's late, they don't even know who to call at that hour, and so they just take care of it because they've been left with the impression that if they don't, it could jeopardize a contract they have or relationship they have. And the holidays are perfect for that, on top of which, if you think about it, during the holiday season, most IT departments are short-staffed because everybody's taking their holiday time. And so, hackers know this. They also know that people have a tendency while they're at work, whether they should or they shouldn't, they're kind of figuring out what holiday presents they're going to get for people. They might be thinking about vacations. They might be doing a variety of things that are not necessarily work-related. In addition to which, what's going on in the world? Well, you have a war in the Ukraine. You have inflation running wild. You have economic data coming out on a daily basis. You have the loan forgiveness program now for student debt. And there's so many things that will capture people's imagination, or on top of which, they're also thinking about COVID, RSV, monkeypox, anything that is a current event, or even charities. This is the time of the year when many charities reach out for people, and you may get a charitable solicitation, but it may not be from the real charity. And all these things are different lures. And, one of the lions in our industry, Bruce Schneider, said something that I absolutely agree with, which is that if you think throwing a ton of money at technology is going to solve your security issues, then you don't understand technology and you don't understand security, because this is a cultural issue. This is building a culture of privacy and security within an organization, making sure that people understand they are part of a very important process, and that it is critical that they understand that anything they do, any link they click, any attachment they open, could subject the organization, everyone in it, and everyone who is a customer of the organization to something quite horrible. And that's why it's so important for organizations to really step up their game, in particular at this time of the year. And if you think about it, some of the biggest breaches, whether it was Target, Home Depot, or the iconic breaches, occurred right around this time of the year. Why? Because people are busy, they're diverted, and that's when the guys who are the bad guys strike.
A key question that has to do with financial transactions, banking and attorneys, etc. Is there a best practice suggestion in terms of transferring money, whether it's ACH, wire, credit card payment, checks? Is there any guidance you could share on that?
Oh, absolutely. And, on our podcast, What the Hack with Adam Levin, we've had several people from different companies that have talked about how their companies were invaded, as it were, by hackers. One in particular, they invaded the email system of a company and notified the people in the accounting department actually, they invaded the email system, and using the email from someone in the accounting department, they sent out an email to a number of their customers saying, we've been having a little trouble with our systems and our banking systems in particular, so here's a new account that we opened, so please wire the money you owe us for rent to this account. And the best practice, so that you don't have a situation where you end up wiring money to a hacker and then you contact your bank and your bank takes the position, hey, you authorized it, you're on the hook for it, is any time that you get wiring instructions from anyone with whom you're doing business, call them and confirm those are the wiring instructions. Just like we've told a lot of people within brokerage organizations, they need to set up a system so that if they're contacted by a consumer or by one of their customers to wire money somewhere, that they should have a protocol in place where it has to be a conversation with someone they know in the organization, where they actually authorize it, and the person in the organization knows the person they're talking to.
Now, we understand that these steps might seem a little like frustrating or cumbersome or high maintenance, but hey, the other side, God forbid, is so awful, is so terrible that those extra steps are absolutely necessary, especially even that story with the CEO at the $200,000 wire. I mean,
no, and there's a story about a public company that will go nameless that wired $46 million to a fraudulent account and was not able to get it back. And there was also situations where Facebook, I was with Facebook and Google, somebody within their organization wired money to the wrong organization, but because they were Facebook and Google, they leaned on the financial institution and they got their money back. But this thing happens every single day. I was at a meeting yesterday with people from a bank that were talking about that a number of their people have, not their people, but their customers had fallen for these scams. And when the customer, even high net worth, calls into the bank goes, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. You authorized it, and as far as we're concerned, you're on the hook for it. Now, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau takes a little bit different position on that, but that's generally involving consumers. But if you're a business and you're wiring money to the wrong place because someone fell for something, it's not so easy to call the bank and say, hey, do me a favor, I messed up. Can you give me my money back?
Mind Your Business with Yitzchok Saftlas right here on 710 WOR. For those that tune in late, no worries. This will go up on YouTube. This incredibly important episode will go up on our popular YouTube channel. On YouTube, we're at 710 WOR Mind Your Business, 710 WOR Mind Your Business. And when you subscribe, you will automatically be notified when an episode goes live. My guest this evening is none other than Adam Levin. How to Protect Yourself. He wrote the book, Swiped, an important and critical business book. Well, not just for business, but certainly for business. Swiped, How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves. It's always a treat and an important necessity to have Adam on from time to time, and that's why we make sure pretty much once a year, I think we have Adam on, and that's, who knows, maybe even necessary to have him on more frequently than that, but certainly at least we can't let a year go by without having Adam. Thank you again for joining me here on Mind Your Business.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. In this last segment, again, this is being recorded in early November 2022, and the holiday season is around the corner. What are some very important best practices?
All right, best practices.
As it relates to businesces, as it relates to businesses to keep secure over the holidays.
Yes, we have a framework we call the 3 M's. You know, how do you minimize your risk of exposure, reduce your attackable surface, especially in a world where you have about 35 billion and increasing daily Internet of Things devices. And think about all the Internet of Things devices in your office: printers, computers, heating systems, security systems, coffee pots, refrigerators, televisions.
Fish tanks.
Fish tank, that's right. We talked about a fish tank the last time we were together. These things can be hacked, and when they're hacked, that someone can get into your network. So the first thing is make sure that you have strong password protocols, that you have serious employee training so that people understand the threats, the red flags, and the solutions. Make sure that you train your people not just to click on links or open attachments, not to just download apps, to use creative answers to security questions, and in their private lives to freeze their credit, and to be careful in their private lives, because if they get hacked in a device that they're using personally that they then use for the business, that could create a problem for the business. So antivirus software is as important for consumers on their digital devices as it is for a business to have on its network, and also multi-factor authentication to make sure that it's not just put in a password and you're in. It's put in a password and then something you have, something you are, or something you know as a second factor. In some cases, it can be a retinal scan, it can be a fingerprint, it can be a code, but that's very important to have that additional security. The second M is monitor. And businesses need to not have what we refer to as patch and pray when they find out about a vulnerability. They need to have an active vulnerability management program where they have a process in place that anytime they're notified of a problem with software or hardware, that they immediately move to apply whatever patch there is. They also need to monitor their systems to make sure that the flow of data isn't unusually large on an exfiltration. as opposed to a normal day. And as an example, when Target was breached, the guys that breached them were so clever. They moved the data sideways within the organization and then moved out only a certain amount of data on a daily basis to stay under the radar with that particular business. So it's important that you are very mindful of data. It is important that you are very mindful of where your data is and what data you have, and that you destroy the data that you no longer need, and you only collect the absolute minimum amount of data as a business that you need. And you should have outside penetration testers, not just the guys within your IT department, but folks on the outside that are doing everything they can to break in so that they can give you a report as to where your vulnerabilities are. And then the third M, how do you manage the damage? And this is not one of those things where you just say, I'm going to send you a tip sheet. Sorry that we got breached. Good luck. This is where you develop a program that you actually train your employees to respond in the event that they are notified that there is a breach of the organization. And this can't be just the IT department. This has to be the legal department, the IT department, the human resources department, and not only your inside communications department, but also your outside communications company that you use. Always have an outside identity theft protection organization on speed dial, because you never know what's going to happen. Know what your laws are, because in this country there is no national uniform breach notification law. There are 54 separate jurisdictions that have 54 separate breach notification laws. So you need to do that. And then you have to have training to the point where when it happens, and God forbid if it happens, but it's more likely when, that your people respond almost as if it's by muscle memory, like sailors on a nuclear submarine. Because the most important thing to keep in mind is how you respond to a breach will define how regulators, class action lawsuit attorneys, and the public views your organization. And it could turn something that is a bad experience into an extinction level event if you don't do it right.
Here's another interesting question as it relates to businesses. Most individuals today on their computer are working with cloud-based software, whether it's a Microsoft product, an Adobe product, the list goes on. Is there any type of recommendation in terms of the settings? Should the settings be automatically set to receive updates? Should updates be performed manually? Should it be done through the IT individual as opposed to the individual who sits at the desk? What are some of the best practices regarding that?
Well, I think it certainly should be done through the IT department. I also think that automatic updates are critical. Manual updates are okay in the event that there's no other way to do it, but you have to be really careful when you manually update, because if you'll remember the SolarWinds attack, which was an attack by Russian hackers, they were on a platform that thousands of companies used, and they disguised the malware in an update. And people clicked on it, and all of a sudden the malware was in their systems. So that's why it's so important to have your systems being monitored. And also remember to be very careful when you look at the contract between your organization and your cloud provider, because it'll be very clear as to where their liability begins and ends and where yours resumes. And make sure that you understand that fully, and understand it's not just the cloud provider that is going to have security for your data. You have to have security for your data. And if you misconfigure those security settings when you provide that information to be stored by your cloud provider, someone might be able to get in, including, we've seen a lot of companies that make the mistake of not encrypting their data. So when it sits on the cloud, it is a sitting duck for hackers. So it is very important for a business to be very involved in their relationship with their cloud provider. You also need to be very involved in your relationship with your different vendors. Every time there's a contract renewal, use it as an opportunity to conduct an investigation as to how secure your vendors are, because how many times have you read where a vendor gets compromised and a business gets hammered because of the compromise of a third party?
I know we're approaching the close, but just any final thoughts about transferring data? Today there's SharePoint, Dropbox, and other tools in terms of storage of photos. Any tips on that?
Well, a lot of them are very good, but it's also, you have to be mindful. You have to be monitoring. It's just like when we tell consumers, do transaction monitoring alerts on your bank and credit card accounts so you know every time there's activity in your account. Well, make sure that your data is encrypted in transit, and then make sure that, based on your relationship with your providers, that it is encrypted where it is being stored, because it really, really could come back to haunt you. And again, remember that cybersecurity is a team sport. It is not an individual sport, and it is something that anyone and everyone has to practice on a daily basis. And we're not just talking about protecting a family or even a business. We're talking about the possibility, based on supply chain issues or business that are involved in critical infrastructure, which so many more businesses are today than ever before, is that protecting your business could also ultimately play into protecting our national security.
What an incredible show. Adam Levin, the author of Swiped, How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves. Adam, it's always great having you on the show. We're out of time. This wraps up a great edition of Mind Your Business. Tune in again next Sunday night for another great edition of Mind Your Business right here on 710 WOR. Have a successful week. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.